We've got two Tylers in the room here today. We'll try not to let the egos get involved, but I appreciate you doing this. For anyone watching or listening, grateful to have you here. Tyler, I've got a lot of questions for you. Maybe you could give a quick introduction or what you'd like to know and how did you end up where you are today?
I look upon myself as I'm an entrepreneur who works 9 to 5. So I've had quite a number of different startups that I've been involved with, but the role I generally take in these companies is I come in very early stage, in this case with Datastreamer, where I'm currently at. I'm one of the co-founders, and I utilize a broad range of experiences that I've had to try to get it to a point that people smarter than me can take over the different areas. So
And
I'm
you
always trying to fire myself.
you seem happy. You're still showing up with a smile, which I like to see. And
Yep.
you sort of talk about these early stage in the companies. And so we're both from London, Ontario. For anyone who's watching this from all over the world, that might not mean much to you. It's probably the third place London in the world. But there's a group of people who have done some really great work from London. And there's two companies that stick out to me. I don't need to linger on your past, but would love to hear any sort of quick thoughts or your reflections on it. So one of the companies that you worked at, Dipley, was at one
Yep.
point the fastest growing internet website in history. It was just bonkers. And then there was massive shift in algorithms and Facebook. And so we'd love to hear maybe just a reflection on that or any context that you think is interesting for anyone listening.
Dipley was definitely an amazing ride. I'm actually, full disclosure, I'm still involved with some things from my time at Dipley. And it was just this crazy ride because if you want to get thrown into the experience of A/B testing, seeing what works,
Mm,
seeing why the little numbers matter so much, when you're pushing 80 to 90,000 users a second going through your site,
wow.
going through your
Yeah.
content, suddenly the 0.001% mean huge amounts of dollars, means huge amounts of traffic, means huge amounts of retention and brand. And so when I joined Dipley, I think there was about 30 or 40 people. And then when I moved on to another startup, there was probably around 300. And so in a 2.5, 3 year period, there's a 10x growth. And all of a sudden, these big names started getting involved. You started to get to know different people really intimately, or get to know, okay, we're serving this customer, we're serving that customer, and get to know some names that, frankly, are huge names in the influencer market. So that was just a crazy journey, just
Yeah.
the sheer scale
Yeah, you were basically
of
you were in
traffic.
like what the true definition of hyperscale, basically, from both traffic and growth internally in the company. And I was not part of that. I was just watched from both close and
Yeah.
afar. And it was just this sort of breaking story in London, which was relatively known for industrial and manufacturing, to have this massive digital company just come out of nowhere. So you went from Dipley, and I'll share some links for this for anyone who's interested in it. It's super fascinating story and journey and the way that they experiment. Then you moved on to one other company that I also had a deep interest in, Media Sonar. And you were
Yeah.
not in entry roles in either of these, director of product management at Dipley, and then VP of strategy at Media Sonar. And for anyone who
Yep.
you could describe Media Sonar, but my experience getting a demo from one of your team members, and basically a little beacon was hovering over the maps, and all data, social media data that was flowing in those little areas would be able to be captured. And what that was being used for, from my understanding, was monitoring lots of different things. But there were some sort of famous stories about criminal activity and all this different stuff that was captured through
Yeah.
Media Sonar in some pretty mind blowing way. So any other sort of, and to me, as I'm saying this, it now connects to the work that you're doing at Datastreamer. I'm like, oh, okay, there's some connection in parallel here.
Yeah.
But any other thoughts on Media Sonar in general? And
From a Media Sonar technology, they're actually, during my time knowing Media Sonar, even before I started working there, there's three main pivots, and they executed these pivots amazingly in
mm,
how they work with data to service the security industry. And on the security industry side, it blows your mind just some of the things that's going on. Not only do you have corporate espionage, you also have people leaking information from the company, often unintentionally. They're
mm,
just sharing kind of stuff. They're opening up too much of the company. And this just creates all these threat vectors into organizations and companies and so on. And it was amazing in my time in Media Sonar because the entire company was really focused around saying, here's an organization. How can this organization be as secure as possible? There's the stuff that's happening inside the four walls, your company security, your access control, your cybersecurity training, and all those kind of elements. But there's also all this stuff outside the four walls
Yeah.
of your company, of threats coming in, stuff that's being leaked through anything from ransomware attack to just disgruntled ex-employees just info dumping to targeted kind of malware or brand attacks. It was crazy just to see, and a little scary, I'll be honest, to just see just how much we had all put ourselves, and even companies have gone and put themselves out on the internet,
Yeah.
and the internet doesn't forget.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's companies and people who are very good at taking this sort of messy flow of data and turning it into accessible components. And that
Yeah,
was the one other thing that always stuck out to me. And I don't know if you have any a point on it, is that people think there's just so much information out there that, like you said, you don't forget it or it doesn't lose. But I think you get this idea of it just gets lost in the sea. So whatever I
yeah.
really do, it doesn't matter. But generally, the people who have the technical ability to capture that data can also have just these incredible filters or retrieval mechanisms to find whatever they want whenever they
Yeah.
want. That was the one part that sort of, I don't know, I had a realization looking at all the data that's flowing in the world with a query or a little bit of one identifier. You can pull everything in perfect organized fashion.
It's also incredible because with just the time scale of stuff like the internet, maybe something was published 8 years ago,
Mm,
but because it was published 8 years ago, it's still accessible, it's still trackable. And so you'll end up with things like, for example, someone says, "Oh, I found a way that I can manipulate these train signals." And then they're like, "Okay, so who has those train signals?" 9 years ago, Via Rail, and by the way, asterisk, this is a completely made up situation. Via Rail went and, or CN or any of those kind of companies went and had a public listing on RFPs of them trying to procure certain materials
mm,
or them trying to hire people that had specialty in certain kind of trade signals. And all it takes is saying, okay, this content may have been across a 9 year span, but I can go from, hey, there's now ways that I can manipulate train signals that are present on the CN rail network, as an
yeah.
example. Massive asterisk there, that's completely made up situation. There's actually companies in London, Ontario alone that handle security for elements like that. But just the fact that, okay, something that happened here, something that happened over there, something that happened over there can all be essentially connected in,
And
right?
I think this is a very natural lead into a shared love that we both have. I guess the term would be unstructured data.
Yeah.
When I think of, there's a wider definition and scope of it, and I'm interested in hearing yours. But my deepest fascination is language data, specifically. I was a big hip hop guy growing up. I thought the power of words was
Mm.
very inspiring, and even the way you say something and how you say it can have such big
Yeah.
consequences. And that my own fascination evolved from, let's review personal data or public speaking data that was coming from
Mhm.
myself, to how can you expand this scope and find valuable sources. I sort of started that journey in 2016, 2017. At that time, this idea of unstructured data was not as prevalent, not as prioritized. And I think we also didn't necessarily have maybe the tools, especially democratized tools, to be able to capture, structure, analyze that information. And the world has changed a
Yeah.
lot. And obviously, what you're doing now has evolved from those changes. And then you've also led some innovation in that. So you are currently co-founder and VP at operations at Datastreamer. I would love to hear maybe you're working in a pretty deep scope in this. So maybe your definition of unstructured data from what you're seeing actually play out in the field and how companies are using it. And then any
Mhm.
maybe other sort of thoughts or summary on current state, or, what you're doing.
Definitely, we have a hugely shared love for unstructured data. Part of the origin story of Datastreamer was actually based off the pain that I experienced both at Dibley and Media Sonar and other
Yeah.
kind of ventures where we're trying to make sense out of unsensible data, or we're trying to find treasures in a garbage pile. And that really is part of the element. And unstructured data, yeah, it's extremely hard to work with, it's extremely hard to pair with your already structured data. The technology to do all that is very new and has definitely ways to go to become powerhouses
Yeah.
that they are today. But really, the way to get to your question, the way I boil it down from unstructured data standpoint, obviously there's the definition. Hey, it doesn't have structure. It's
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's actually a bit more broad than that. I like to contrast it to the data an organization can use versus the data that they're unable to use.
Mm.
And the data that they're unable to use due to the fact that it's lacking the proper structure or the proper adherence to their schema can be everything from saying, I have an Excel table. Great, that's structured. It's saved as a JPEG. Congratulations. Even
Okay.
though that original thing had structure, you've just gone and ruined
Yeah,
it all.
you
You
were
can't use
destroyed
it
it.
anymore. So you could say the information within is structured, but congratulations. You've
Yeah.
done something, you've broken it. And then there's the elements of companies saying, hey, we have all these PDFs, they're all ordered in this nice folder structured, they're tagged beautifully. What's inside those PDFs? We have no idea. And it's okay.
Yeah.
So you have some structure, but in its end, you can't shove that into your Snowflake
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
can't shove that into your BigQuery database and use it to digest it. Now, what I specialize in, partly due to definitely my experience working in those two companies, is with external unstructured data. So the type of data, the structured data that's coming into an organization from outside their four, because that is uniquely interesting in the fact that there is zero control that the company has in
Mm.
terms of what they're bringing in.
Yeah.
They're pulling PDFs off a government website. You have no control in the formatting. You have no control of the tagging, how it's titled,
Yeah.
anything. And that's where I specialize. And so I see the most unstructured of unstructured
Yeah.
data.
Which is basically an infinitely evolving puzzle piece, I guess, that
It
you're
is.
you're trying to solve. And
Yeah.
that is then some of the value proposition that you've built. You've basically you've identified valuable data sources. And this is me trying to articulate from my understanding what you're doing. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you've
Sure.
identified these sources, you're pulling in that information. There's a fire hose of that information, and then you're basically helping structure or semi-structure that information so that companies can use it in the way that they want. And I actually watched a little video of someone who had been using Datastreamer and said, what's one of the nice pieces is if you go to a self-serve platform or a UI-based platform, you're maybe stuck within the confines of the dashboard visualizations and things they do, where you're plugging or passing through the raw data, but in a nice format. Did I get any of that wrong? Anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. I can give you a little bit more on not the sales pitch, but I'll give you a bit more of like a
Yeah, no,
bit
please do.
behind the scenes
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
technical side. There's really within the Datastreamer platform, we built it really to be like a box of Legos. So you can
Mm,
assemble it however you want. So you have all these different components, etc., but that you can assemble of data sources, different enrichments, NLP models, etc. But if you think of the Lego analogy, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to be Lego pieces. Can't go and take Duplo and some wooden blocks and jam them
yeah,
together with
yeah.
Lego, right? So the first thing essentially in our platform is it breaks down to three main stages. The first is ingestion. So we can handle the ingestion from any sources. So that's we have some connectors out to different data aggregators out there, but also we're not limited by that. It's any data that a company wants to bring. Some people are bringing huge amounts of scraped HTML pages, or bringing PDFs, or
Mm,
bringing CS, all types of different documents. But then the main part, which is a bit of our secret sauce in here, is this part that we have. It's called Unify. And so what Unify does is it first breaks it all down to a common format, and then it converts it all to your schema.
mm,
Now, unstructured data. So if it has some structure, cool. That's a nice simple translation. ETL on steroids plus
yeah.
for something like that. But then if it doesn't have the structure, that's where the AI components of our platform kick in to say, hey, this is the schema you need. This is the document coming in. Here's an RFP document or a grant document. That's missing the deadline dates. It's missing the
Mm,
amounts. That wasn't part. Okay, cool. It will consume the document. It will populate what you need in the schema. And then the third part of the platform then goes really into that Lego. So we've brought it all in. We've used Unify to convert it all into Legos. Now you can assemble it how you need to be your pipelines going out. So one of the things like someone might do is they might redact PII content. They might
Yep.
run sentiment. They might translate it, whatever element. And then that goes off to whatever system it needs to be. So BigQuery could go off to Snowflake instance, could go off to any of those kind of data destinations. But it's definitely something where technology wise, that stuff's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to do.
And I'm
Yeah.
interested. So one, just to follow up on that, you maybe you could paint a picture of the I'll just ask this. What is the most popular, or is maybe it's diversified across different industries and verticals, but like the most popular or sought after data that you're finding from customers coming to you?
Nowadays, it's consuming PDFs
Interesting.
from the web.
Yeah.
This comes from a number of different areas. You have companies that are starting to kick off their own AI solutions in house. Hey, we have all this recorded video and audio. Let's figure out what's being said in it.
Yeah.
We're on a parallel side where people are saying, hey, we have all these PDFs. We've had customer conversations where people are like, yeah, we acquired X company, we acquired Y company. We just have all this PDF content, all the way up to people who are doing things like, for example, in the financial sector, sanctions or
Mm,
changes to tax law.
interesting.
If you're a company that advises global clients on taxes, anytime any government, any state, even down to cities in some case, amend some of their tax rules, that's a PDF that's thrown on a website. But the
Languages.
moment that PDF is
Yeah.
published,
Yeah.
you have to follow it. So that changes the whole dynamics of what's required.
And one of the other, generally, you're looking at external data. Obviously, companies are interested in social data. We had this experience. One of the things we were pulling was Twitter data. And
Mhm.
Elon took over and shut off the pipeline, or at
Yeah,
least made
yeah.
the pipeline relatively cost prohibitive. I think still interacting with Twitter, is that still, or maybe that's part of the value proposition that your
Yeah.
company has, is that you're actually able to still pull that data.
Part of the so from our platform side, this whole unify type of element
Yeah.
means that if a company wants to bring in different data sources, their effort to do it really boils down to being, in many cases, less than a day to
Mm,
bring a new data source.
yeah.
So you have a number of companies that basically said, "Oh, I want to use Twitter official." Okay, cool. Plug it in. You're set to go. There's no extra work. So a lot of our customers, when things like that happen, they were able to switch or start or stop or figure out their data side immediately. Definitely Elon has done some very interesting things at X or
Yeah.
Twitter. I
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
call it Twitter. I'm
And
old
most,
school. He's definitely done some interesting things there. I'm hoping that as some of the changes kind of refine and mature and so on, that we'll actually be able to move on to having an official partnership.
mm,
Right now, people can go and they can work with Twitter, get an API key from them, plug them into our system and go. So that's one thing today, but I'm hoping that one day we'll be actually able to be
a little
listed there
close.
as an
Yeah.
official partner. When it comes to social media content, the fact of the matter is that there's an interesting dynamic shift that's happened in the last, I would say, year and a half. Partly ChatGPT driven, partly Elon driven, partly it was just investors saying, "Hey, I you've run in the negative for 15 years. It's time to wake up."
Yeah.
Right? Not talking about Reddit, but
Zero.
anyways, so a lot of that is people saying, "What is your actual data strategy?"
Yeah.
And so we see, okay, so Twitter, Reddit, Quora, they've all moved to models where they're actually have in-house, they're actually
Yeah.
handling the commercialization of their data. Instagram has gone away from that.
Mm,
I think that Instagram and Threads is gonna come back to that, where they're gonna offer some commercialization of data. The other one that's interesting in this is the companies that make their data available
yep.
directly correlate to the companies that have better ad intelligence as
Mm,
well. And I've noticed that now, some are still in progress, but if you think of ones like, for example, if you're advertising on Apple ads, you only have intelligence that the Apple Ads platform is essentially giving you. You don't know what's trending. You don't know what's going on from a competitive landscape. You
mm,
don't know, hey, which hashtags are hot right now
yeah.
that I can go and create content or get onto the viral train, etc.
Mm,
Facebook is probably the most mature about that. Platforms like Snapchat, TikTok, etc. People who are creating content on those sites aren't making a lot of money because it's
Yeah.
blind.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
blind. So I see it as like this big trend, and I think partially fueled by interest rates and
Mm.
elements like that, there's going to be much more of a push for people to monetize their
Yeah.
data than before. But
I
time
think,
will tell. I
and I
can be
think
futurist, but time will
part,
tell.
part is, I think exactly like what you've just said. Let's monetize something. And the value that we actually have is the data or the community that is creating data and content on our sites. I think the other realization that these companies had was we left our data open, and these big foundational large language models scraped all our data, created the most intelligent
Yeah.
systems in the world, and are now billion-dollar companies. We've got nothing for this. So I think there was that trend. I think we'll see both of those pressures are going to make this continue to compound. I think we need to monetize our data. It's valuable. And
Yeah.
we don't want to be giving all our value to other companies. And Core took this on. They developed this Poe tool, this sort of chat, and lots of
Yeah.
problems and some controversy around that right now. But in general, I think we'll
Mhm.
see that transformation continue to happen.
It's interesting too, because an example I like to point at about that was Apple.
Mm.
Apple says, hey, we take your security paramount. We're going to make it so that advertisers cannot track you if you don't want to. By the way, we're releasing Apple ads. We have our own ads platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Or Instagram being, hey, we're not going to have public APIs for searchability of data. By the way, we have ads on it. So I think that there's definitely, that monetization is there. Either they'll monetize the data themselves, so like a direct data strategy, Reddit, Twitter, etc., or the data will be monetized a less obvious kind of manner and instead be monetized through ad tech solutions like Facebook, Apple, etc. So monetization will happen one way or the other, I'm pretty
We've
sure.
seen one other, this was pointed out to me actually by Quinn Lawson in one of the last conversations I had. And the other part that I hadn't realized, but it's coming down, is this basically these mail servers saying, hey, we're going to stop spam. We're going to stop outbound sales from running. Basically, we're really
Mhm.
going to clamp down. So one of the channels that you use for customer acquisition, we're going to really cut, but you can use Google Ads to advertise and acquire customers that way. So don't worry, we're all good. So I think we're seeing
Yeah.
shifts in multiple directions. So for anyone who's any interest in following that, apparently in February 2024, Yahoo, Gmail are going to, put some pretty massive restrictions on the amount of email that you can send in an outbound manner. So
Yeah.
I think we are seeing this sort of fundamental shift that's happening, and a lot of different forces are all compounding at once. Maybe Google search, for example, threatened or concerned about use of ChatGPT or Bing Chat, and needing to squeeze every dollar out of this Google Ads search engine as it continues to maybe have
Yeah.
some sort of decline. I think we'll see innovation there, but Google itself, I was a huge Google advertiser. I still advertise on search, but they're starting to obfuscate or remove the amount of data that they're even giving back to you. But there's a chokehold that is also available where, what else are you going to do? You can't send emails anymore. Where are you going to go? So
Yeah.
I think there's
Exactly.
a fascinating piece here. Now, one of the other things that I think I wanted to talk to you about is, so I was looking at the website, and there's been a transition in the techniques that you may use to get value from unstructured language data. And the best way you work, I think, much more maybe on an enterprise API, working with developers closely.
Yep.
We work a lot with, I would say, research teams who are actually interested in using an interface. And so they're not maybe developers or data scientists. And so they want a UI or front end, and lots of challenges with that. Sometimes I wish we had just built APIs, but I won't complain about that. But the part that was fascinating to me is they would take, whether it was interviews or focus groups or documents, and you'd run some sentiment, and then you would do some named entity recognition, and you'd extract the entities out. And then you would say, okay, this brand, and if you pair it with sentiment, we can interpret or extrapolate that people are talking negatively about
Yes.
this. And so that was like a piecemeal way, or I would say from 2016 to September 2022 was the way that people were figuring out how to address that problem. And obviously there has been this massive momentum behind transformers and large language models. And it seems that the behavior or the shift has now been, I don't want to use these. I don't think they're archaic techniques. I think they're actually very valuable, but sometimes seemingly archaic. Why would I piece these all things together when I can literally just ask the question that I want and get the answer? So I'm interested, any behavior shift that you're seeing or any high level assessment from that sort of shift in the market from your perspective?
Yeah. So I think that there's one definitely a difference. You pointed out some of the nuances that are different in kind of our approaches and our target audience within different companies. For us, the perspective that I'm going to answer that point from is that when data streamers platforms are used, they're used to augment, to unify, to clean up data, which then gets put into a system.
Mm.
And then that system probably will generate insights, or researchers would then use that system to pull insights, et cetera. So for us, it's not about, hey, people are looking to our pipelines to be able to generate those insights, generate those summaries, answer that question. They're asking that from the next step in the data
Next
supply
level.
chain. But that doesn't change some of the elements that you're talking about, is that people are hoping when they use kind of our pipelines to be able to get a certain amount of intelligence and amount of to be present in that content for them to then do that analysis,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so we're seeing it on a bit different. Like, you have these specialized classifiers, these specialized ones. They're built to move very quickly. They're built to operate on huge amounts of data at a time. We at one point, I think we were, I'm not sure what the numbers are today, but I know at one point we were sitting somewhere around 120,000 kind of classifiers or
Wow.
enhancements
Yeah,
per
yeah.
second, right?
Wow.
So there's multiple different classifiers and enrichment options, et cetera, that are happening. So there's a focus on speed, but because it's not feeding a person, it's also going to be feeding a database.
Mm.
That changes what people will want out of it. Now, sentiment's easy. It's positive. It's negative.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
neutral. Okay, that's easy. LLMs do not like to give consistent answers.
Yes. Very true.
They're bad.
Yeah, yeah.
How many times? I think I said, I jokingly went and put into ChatGPT, and what's one plus one?
Mm.
What should the answer be? Just the number two.
Yeah,
Instead, I had a whole paragraph.
yeah.
Great for a person. Machines don't like that.
Don't want it. Unnecessary details.
You've basically gone and taken, okay, I have field A, 1, field 2, 1, and field 3 plus. Combine those together. Congratulations. So structured, you pass it through an LLM and it gives you a paragraph. You've made it even less
Yeah,
structured than
yeah,
it was to
exactly.
begin with, which is the paragraph answer. All that kind of human language type of approach is perfect for a human or an analyst or a researcher, et cetera. It's not any good for a database, though, which has been our trouble. When I mentioned that Unify AI earlier, one of the things we were so excited about it is, hey, here's an LLM that will just give you the answer and it will be consistent.
Yeah.
So if you're running it on 50,000 documents, you're going to get something that's consistent across
Yeah.
50,000 documents. But all the LLMs, though, that I see, Llama, ChatGPT, like all those other ones, what I see is that they are built for humans to use
Mm.
and they suck for systems to use. So I see that as being around that whole picture. That's one thing I see in the landscape is that, and there's also the problem. There's only so many humans that are going to use an AI on a daily basis, and there's only so many places you can put a chat platform.
Yeah.
There's an AI on my weather app now. It's ask me questions. Is it going to snow today? I'm like, or I could just scroll
I can
down
see
and
the
just
picture.
see
Yeah,
if
it's
there's snow.
gonna
Like,
snow. Yeah.
okay, you're reaching the point where you're just putting it for the sake of putting it in. But
I think
those are,
we'll be overwhelmed by chat experiences. Everywhere we
oh
go, we're
yeah,
going to be pushed into a chat. And I think you touched on something very interesting, which is there's this human element where it works for a human because we love conversation back and forth and information or ideally insights packed in that format. But I think it also speaks to one of the challenges, especially at the scale that you're, is just like it only is also good for a certain amount of data. And there's an amazing sort of little presentation that Andrew and G gave, and he talked about the value of of artificial intelligence and where the future heads. And it was interesting. He had these bubbles where they currently are
mhm,
now and where they're going to expand. And generative AI obviously is going to have some rapid expansion, but in the end, it's actually going to go back to classification and a lot of more tasks that jokingly early said are archaic but are valuable. And we
Okay.
see the same thing as we go upscale and we start to work with bigger teams with larger data sets. First of all, the large language models generally don't work because they have to remove specific amounts of information to be able to fit into their character limitations and provide an answer. So immediately
Yeah.
you've deprioritized information that could be relevant and probably should be thought about in the actual answer. And in general, they're not at that level. Say, just an example, large retail store, they're getting thousands per day data points of feedback and reviews. They
Yeah.
at a core level, it's just so much information. They don't actually want to ask questions. They're trying to classify it into standardized themes and see what's trending up, what's trending down, and then where can they intervene and support. The other phenomenon that I've seen over and over again is, I think there's two sides where if you have a dashboard or visualization, it can be in probably the same. If you talked about how many classifications you have, if you were to just visualize how many classifications, you would just die. You would look at that, whatever that, and you would just fall over. And so I've seen the side of overwhelm that comes from like classification / over visualization or too many insights. But then I've seen the opposite when you throw up an empty chat interface, people don't know what question to ask, or they don't even know how to get to the answer. And so there's this sort of compounding challenges on both sides that are fascinating. And to me, it seems like there'll be maybe an over indexing on chat. People will realize that you don't want to force people to have to ask the questions and continue to query. You just want to surface the information that is relevant to them at that time when they need it. So there is a lot of hype right now from working at the ground level and seeing people actually use it. I also see the challenges that are involved.
It's a lot like the voice assistants, like the
Yes.
Echoes, the
Yeah.
Google
Yep.
Homes, etc. I have a Google Home on my desk, so I gotta be careful on
Be
what I
nice to it.
say
Yeah.
before it wakes
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But it used to be that I would say, Echo, tell me a joke. And it's, look how cool this is. This is neat. This is technology. And then you can go tell the Echo or Alexa, you can go tell Alexa to, hey, we need to buy more Greenies dog treats. I'm like, I will never do that.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times that I've asked you to play a song and you play
Got
some
it wrong.
random song I've never heard before when I've expressly told you the song and the artist.
Yeah.
And I actually had to go and put on the Google Homes, you can put a little prompt in where you say, if I say this, respond with this. And my kids were getting to a point where they were getting quite rude with it. And they're telling, shut up or be quiet or something like that. And so I put in little messages as well that it would respond with. And it's
basically programmed it. It wasn't really doing it.
You're the reason people are scared at the robot uprising. Or something like that. But just from a joke, you think back, like when the Alexas and the Google Homes and so on came out, it was huge. It was everyone wants to have it. Everyone wants to play with it. Someone comes into your house and you're like, hey, ask it to turn on the lights. But where are we at now? We're at that, at least in my house, it's a glorified speaker. It does my timings for when I'm cooking. And occasionally I'll use it from a Google search standpoint to win an argument or lose.
Right.
50-50. To lose an argument more than I win it by giving up some obscure fact. Like that's how it's become normalized today. Now, I think your point there of saying, well, are we just going to get inundated with these chat solutions? Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to go to my weather app and say, what is your prediction for when I should put on snow tires this year? And it to give me a nice answer based on all its historical data, etc. But do I need an umbrella today? Well, there's a picture 50 pixels below that tells me that answer.
Yeah, I'm looking outside and it's raining.
Or I'm looking outside, or I'm looking at 60% precipitation. That's the exact answer that the app would give me, like the chat. You've given me no value, right?
Yeah, and we've seen relatively, it seems like the Alexa team is shuttered / pushed to other things because the adoption and value creation of that was maybe not what we promised. I do think there's a great company called VoiceFlow out of Toronto here now, and they built a beautiful they were originally conversational, like a builder on top of Alexa and Google Assistant. Same problem, very challenging, are strict flows of what you could accomplish. Now they've actually got these very dynamic enrichments using the LLMs that allow it to be a much more natural, organic experience. Does that translate over time? I'm not sure, but it's interesting to see a little bit of a breakthrough or improvement coming. Again, I still don't, I think when you get promised a technology and it doesn't necessarily deliver, you're hesitant to re-engage.
There was a joke that I saw at one point, and I think it was an April Fool's type thing. And it was that they were going to put Apple CarPlay in like the plane displays.
Okay.
So instead of it being a touchscreen because icky and COVID and all that
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
you could speak to it.
Mm,
And you have basically the clip was like
yeah.
everyone on headphones and the person's volume up and then raises like everyone's volume up because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you got
Interesting.
like four of them and but it's okay. Voice interaction technology
Yeah.
with something like let's say Google Home or whatever, yeah, you won't see those go into planes.
We say that on, not to date the thing there, not to date this too much, but a release of, I guess, more of a consumer interaction to the sort of chat GPT application. Apparently this team's still pushing things and it's primarily through voice. And so it's a little bit more of an intelligence layer. And
Yeah.
I'm still skeptical, but I think the development of voice synthesis and intelligent layers behind it, at least we're moving towards a more natural experience. So I wanted to touch on something. This is a little bit of a personal curiosity, but from I
Sure.
think there's a connection here, which the parallel or the contrast between what maybe we're doing and you're doing much more at sort of the enterprise, larger scale level. We're dealing with a lot of people who are actually using the data. Would you classify yourself as relatively industry agnostic? And if so, would just love to hear maybe the opportunities, but then also maybe the challenges that face, because people are interested in the data. And I know this is the argument that we've always used. For us, if you give us data, so our pillars, you have the unified pillars. We say capture, analyze, and share because you need to be able to share at the end to close the loop. But we say, hey, give us audio, video, data. It's the same process for us. We don't really care what kind of information, but at the same time, the enrichment that you do, or the analysis that you do, or the final output that is created, because you're going a little bit more horizontal and maybe not necessarily, hey, just finance, just healthcare, whatever it is, maybe the insights aren't as tailored and relevant. So do you classify yourself in that sort of sector agnostic? And if so, are there challenges? Are there opportunities? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I would say that we are sector agnostic. If anybody has a problem, they could use our platform.
Yeah.
That yeah, not specific by industry, etc. That being said, I think it's almost impossible to market, especially at an enterprise, without a focus on certain industries, etc.
Yeah.
Part of that is just the social proof, the use cases, the
Mm,
understanding of the nuances needs to be there on a sales and marketing standpoint. But also there's different industries where there's a nature of competitiveness across the companies.
yeah.
If one company in the space or two companies in the space start announcing features that they can solve this problem, and to solve that problem efficiently, you need to either build it in house or you need something like Datastreamer or so on. Then everyone else in that space is going to be paying attention.
Yeah.
And so you'll end up with these early adopters in different stages that will push an entire market or push an entire industry forward. Or on the contrary side, you end up with situations that are external market that would affect one industry more than others. So no one really cared about sanctions. Majority of people didn't even know what sanctions were
Mm,
until sanctions started getting dropped heavily
yeah. Yeah.
because of the Russian Ukrainian war, right? And suddenly everyone knew what a sanction was. Banks were like, oh, wow, we've been giving massive loans to this company, can't even operate outside now.
Yeah.
And so you'll end up with something like, for example, in the due diligence in the KYC space, where suddenly they all need to care about sanctions and they all needs to happen at once. Or with changes in even the social media landscape of saying, wow, suddenly everyone's really paying attention to community moderation.
Mm,
How do we get a handle on our community moderation? Yeah, you see the big flagship ones of Twitter and
yep.
examples like that. That also expands even down to the supporting chat rooms or forums of a video game
Mm,
publisher and different kind of sectors. Now, for us, there's four main industries that we focus on because we know we do really well in those industries. They all have demand. They're all interested in everything that we have to say. But yeah, from a solution standpoint, do you have external unstructured data, specifically
mm.
text and document data? Yeah, cool. We're a solution for you. Who are we hunting for people in? Then that gets a bit more specific.
And so you talked about documents and text. I'm wondering, where are you in the journey? Is it something you even want to deal with processing audio and video? Yeah.
I'd love to. And going back to that whole philosophy around our system as being like a Lego system,
Mm,
partnerships are huge in there.
yeah.
I look forward to us potentially having those conversations.
Yeah. And just in general, I think I've had, first of all, the company that we started was called Speak AI. So we had to do audio and video. But about a
Mhm.
year and a half in, I just said, God damn, I wish I had just done text data, because the amount of complexities and variables that get thrown into audio and video and accuracy and accents and audio
Yeah.
quality, it's the same thing. Like same in text and documents. It used to be a PDF, now it's a JPEG. So now you need to use OCR to pull off the text off the file. Like it's a mess no matter what. But audio and
Yeah.
video has both a passion in my heart and extra hate sometimes
You know
dealing with
what?
it.
I won't lie at all in saying that I've had the same thing of looking at text and documents and saying, audio and video would be so much easier because at least people are going to be speaking a language.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
So it's definitely a lot of elements there of grass is greener here, grass is greener there. I think that the one thing that is very interesting in unstructured data versus structured data, and this is an education point for a lot of customers on the enterprise side. For the people we're talking to, they get it, but they need their supporting team, their executive team. When you're working with unstructured data, it's not 100% accurate all the time.
Yes, yeah, for
There's
sure.
a certain leeway. And definitely, if you ever throw the Google captions on a YouTube video and get a great laugh out of it,
Yeah,
of just
exactly. Yeah,
what's going on there. That's a perfect example. But in the text and document side, I think that the bar for accuracy is definitely a lot higher. And part of it has to do with the fact that time doesn't matter as much.
mm,
So if you read a document 3 times faster, you can't watch a video 3 times faster and be able
ingest it
to
all. Yeah,
ingest the
yeah,
same. And so there's this wonderful, and I say it's a wonderful challenge because the day that there's no more problems to solve is the day that doing businesses is no longer
yeah. We
fun.
just all lay down on the ground.
Like that cruise ship in Wally,
Yeah, yeah,
all just sitting on our chairs,
yeah,
zooming around.
exactly.
So the reason I say it's like a wonderful challenge is the fact that there's this expectation of structured data, which the tolerance for inaccuracy is close to zero. But in unstructured data, there has to be a certain amount of tolerance. Maybe that's 97, maybe it's
Yeah,
95.
yep.
It's definitely still in the 90s, even the high 90s, but it can't be 100.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things, and this goes back to on the media sonar side, is if someone was to, for example, say something and use the word killer,
Sentiment. Yeah,
right? So sentiment, okay, killer, that's bad,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
violence, etc. And so we used to test. We had a machine learning model that could pull up what was violence and what was not violence.
Mm,
And one of the examples we threw at it was that was a killer chicken dinner.
yeah, exactly.
And if you just went and said, hey, you know what? Let's add the tagging, let's add the metadata field of violent intent
Yeah,
or violence reported or
very
something
negative.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the chicken definitely went
it
through some
it
violent
it's
things.
dead.
Depending how hungry you were, you may have looked pretty violent eating the
Yeah,
chicken. It's not a violent thing in that sense. And so there's a certain amount of, and that's a challenge on the enterprise side,
yeah.
is there's a certain amount of understanding that needs to happen there.
Yeah, in audio and video, you deal, I think, probably the same with some of your classifications. You deal with it with a confidence interval. We're this
Oh yeah,
confident
yeah,
in how accurate this
yeah.
transcript is. And we've seen some hilarious wrong pieces there too. So I know you have a very valuable role and valuable time, and I've drilled you with questions. So I want to be respectful of that. Is there anything that you wanted to share or go through?
The one thing that I would say, which is a bit of a personal passion, but also just looking out and saying, where is this whole unstructured data market going? Because we're both in it,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And frankly, where it boils down to being is I'm surprised at the number of anecdotes of companies and so on that we've talked to who are, yeah, I have 4 terabytes of completely unstructured data.
Yep.
I have no idea what it is. It's one of my strategic initiatives to deal with it.
Mm,
And in kind of that sentence right there, it's becoming clear that people are starting to realize how much unstructured data that they have,
yep.
that they need to deal with. But a lot of the CTOs and directors of engineering and research leads and so on, it's not clear for them what their path is.
Yep. Yeah, I completely
And
agree.
so I think it's with all this kind of element, then You hear people dropping LinkedIn pundit posts that are like, oh,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
best way to deal with 4 terabytes is to feed it to Chat GPT and ask
Yeah,
it to summarize it. You're like, congratulations, your company's now bankrupt.
yeah.
OpenAI's not, but hey, well,
Well, we'll
who knows
see.
what they're doing over there
Yeah,
these
we don't
days.
know what. Yeah, as of recording, we're not really sure, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. As of recording, it sounds like Sam Altman is announced he's going back to
Daddy's
OpenAI.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I definitely see, just on that topic, I was reading the responses on social media to that announcement, and a lot of people are saying we had a project to implement ChatGPT into this or to implement chatbot. Because of all this news, executives has just put a hold on that project,
Yeah.
because if OpenAI is going to lose 90% of its workforce, do we have the right tech? That's interesting. I think that may have just gone and really impacted the hype for Q1
Yeah.
of next year. But going back to the point that I was making there really is this gap between, we have this unstructured data, all these executives and leadership, they've had all this education paid for by Deloitte, the
Yeah. Yeah.
Snowflakes, etc., of how to deal with your structured data lakehouse, data
Yep.
warehouse, like all the difference that are going on into there. Now here comes the next big beast in sequence, is all that data that isn't in your data something house,
Mm.
that needs to get usable or needs to get analyzed or needs to feed into the insights of your company. I'm not sure when this is going to happen, but I think the next big nexus point that needs to start happening is one of the big players, Deloitte, the PwCs, etc., is going to start educating the C-suite, the technical
Yeah.
C-suite, at a massive level, and suddenly everyone's going to be like, okay, let's not be behind the trend for the fifth time in a row.
Yeah.
Let's get this done. And so that's going to be an interesting thing. Might happen in Q1, might happen in Q2, but
Yeah.
that's going to be very interesting for all of us in the unstructured data space.
Yeah, and I've seen similar things. Just a couple thoughts from my perspective for what we're seeing. Like, I think there's a lot of hesitancy right now for companies. Like a lot of proof of concepts. Some of them, because of who their implementation partner is, have gone well. Some of
Yeah.
them have not. Some of them don't know who to bet on. I think generally, and this OpenAI thing just threw even more chaos into that decision, because at one point there was a clear leader. I think there was still challenges with OpenAI, and I think a company like, again, Microsoft and Azure with their Azure cloud infrastructure, which is powering OpenAI anyways, with the security and the just someone that you recognize, I think
Yeah.
will still
Yeah.
win a lot of these things, because they have the security, they have all the support, they can give you the credits up front to do these things and run these
Mhm.
proof of concepts. Whereas you're working with a startup, you got to say, hey, you got to pay me $100,000 for this proof of concept, and we hope that it goes well. I
Yeah.
think we'll see some of that. I think you mentioned the McKinseys of the world. They've seemed like they've picked their partners for this journey. McKinsey picked Cohere, which is a Toronto company
Yeah.
building foundational large language models. Obviously, Cohere's mission embedded into them is for them to push that message out. And a lot of their
Mhm.
messaging is enterprise ready on-prem deployment. So I think the security issue is going to continue to arise. And the last note I personally think is, so we saw Mark Benioff aggressively go after these OpenAI employees when all this implosion happened. And the thing that I found interesting about the Salesforce example is they've got this beautiful blend of unstructured and structured data. Two other companies that stick out to me in this specific example, and I'm sure you've got one's called Gong, one's called Chorus AI. And basically
Yeah.
these are all sales powered, capture the conversations you're having in email, all the sales calls you're doing. But then you've also pulled in the CRM data if it turned into a close. So you've got this wonderful mechanism of unstructured and structured data. And
Yeah.
those companies will have a lot of leverage and power. Salesforce has a lot of leverage right now with Einstein.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we talk about these chat experiences, they're pushing their chat experience. But I think if you can combine the right data, proprietary data, with the architecture and the unstructured and structured data, there's a lot of value in that. Probably the most, have you ever played with Code Interpreter at all?
I've played with it a bit. I'm going to be honest, I didn't play with it as much as I want to. It's probably sitting on my to-do
Yeah.
list somewhere. Yeah.
It's not as sufficient as it should be, but
Mhm.
this idea of what you're talking about, where you've got unstructured data, then you're enriching it with meta details to semi-structure it. And then
Mhm.
there's a lot of people in the world who can use tools and mechanisms and code and collab to visualize that information and do whatever they want. There's a lot of people who can't too. So to be able to
Yeah.
have a little bit more conversational interaction with that data, but it's actually not just looking at the unstructured, it's pulling in the quantitative elements. There's a lot of power in that. So I do think we will see more of a refined use case for these large language models that is actually articulating and holding in the structured parts. And that's where we'll start to see more valuable, at least business breakthroughs, even personal breakthroughs. I'll just share one last example. I know I'm ranting right now, but the Whoop strap, they embedded
Yeah.
OpenAI into the Whoop strap. And so it's got all your personal activity data. And obviously there's some insights and visualizations on there, but if you pair that
Mhm.
with a conversational intervention, you can query that data and then also get recommendations and stuff based off it. There's a paradigm shift there. So
Yeah.
I went all the way from enterprise to personal, but and shared a little bit too much, but that's
Yeah.
how I'm viewing it. And I think we're all ingesting this. And sometimes I just wake up in the morning and I'm ready to ingest another fire hose of information. And the last part I think that you talked about a bit is that also this chaos in the world is leading companies to invest in either their own models or open source llama, where they have more control. So I actually think maybe in a healthy destabilization, this OpenAI thing that happened, Hugging Face, for example, will be a benefactor. Overall.
Yeah.
Facebook's llama model will be a benefactor of this overall.
Even things like Google Vertex, et cetera, where
Yes.
you have the
Yeah.
ability to freeze the model and so on.
Yeah.
The one AI product, though, that I can't wait for someone to do really well is a proper AI assistant technology that can plug into all my things. Pull the tasks out of Notion,
Yeah.
pull the tasks out of there. Know when I've sent an email, be like, hey, that email that you just sent actually completes this follow up task. I'm just waiting for. I have Superhuman, I have
Yeah. You've got
Motion, I have
them.
Notion, I have the whole thing, but I'm just looking for that one thing that can be your brain outside your body. But
My only concern about that is it's like a mirage in the desert. Like that's like a
oh yeah,
technological destination, your utopia that we are all striving for. And I'm not sure if we're going to get there, or slash the winner who actually achieves that is going to be the incumbent Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and we're going to have our own reservations.
yeah. If a company goes over and says, "Hey, we can do that," the first thing I'm going to do is find out who their CISO is
Yeah, yeah.
on LinkedIn and take
Track them
a
down.
look.
Yeah, you won't send them any more outbound emails, but you'll find them on LinkedIn for now. Any other closing thoughts here?
No, really looking forward to seeing how our companies both evolve. I think it's
Yeah,
an exciting space. It's growing. I think it's going to grow huge. And hopefully one day we can park our yacht side by side.
that would be very nice, sir. I
Yeah.
look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining, Tyler, and for everyone
Yeah.
who checked this out. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.
All right.